back to the channel, everyone. Time for some more creepy videos, so let's have a look.
Do you think we went to the moon?
Yeah, I do. I believe we went to the moon, but we lied about it. And what I mean by that is, yes, we went to the moon, but when you analyze several things, the footage, you see a mix of real footage and you see a mix of artificial footage.
That's my thinking too.
Now, why is that? I had to dig into this deeper. They discovered on the moon that there were artificial structures.
Oh.
There's evidence of war on the moon. There's debris laying all over the place. The moon mission was a reconnaissance mission, and the race to the moon between us and Russia was who's going to get their hands on that ancient technology first and bring it back and reverse engineer it. That's what the whole moon mission was all about. And that's why they show you this barren landscape, fake video. Meanwhile, it's all about getting the technology that's laying around. China sent a rover up there, and it got stuck in the debris. And it transmitted an image back before they can delete it. And that went worldwide. It was global. That was like 5 years ago. Yeah, China rover stuck in the debris on the moon.
When I was saying it proves that they didn't go to the moon, my critique of myself is that I didn't look at it objectively because I wanted one conclusion to be true. And I wanted that conclusion to be that the moon landing was fake. So I looked at it and I was saying to myself, okay, did I come to this conclusion because there's a lot of evidence that shows it to be fake, or have I seen a lot of evidence that looks fake? There's a bunch of different possibilities. Bill Clinton had a quote in his book, and he had a quote about the moon landing and a story about him having this conversation with a carpenter. This carpenter said that he didn't believe the moon landing. He goes, them television fellers, they can make anything look real. And he said, back then, I thought that guy was a quack. But after 8 years in the White House, I was wondering if he wasn't ahead of his time. There's also the possibility that whatever photographs they took can get severely damaged in the radiation of space, and that it was really difficult to do. They actually did go, and they decided they're going to pass off some of these fake videos. But does that mean they didn't go to the moon? No, it doesn't.
Mr. Armstrong, Bart Sibrel, ABC Digital. Wanted to give you the opportunity to swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon. Will you put your left hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
Gentlemen. Mr. Sibrel.
Yes? If you really walked on the moon, why will you not do that? So why don't you just put the end to the record in the argument and put your hand on the Bible, swear to God you walked on the moon.
Mr. Sibrel, knowing you, that's probably a fake Bible.
Really? Well, no, it's a real Bible. You have the opportunity to have $5,000.
The meeting is not open.
Well, you have $5,000 cash. You can give it to charity if you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon. I have the tape.
That'd be fine.
Why don't you swear to... Why not? Why won't you do it? So why don't you put your hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
Mr. Sibrel has made a fool of himself in front of the world. Mr. Sibrel, you do not deserve answers.
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. And if it didn't happen, it's nice to know why it didn't happen. So in the future, if we want to keep doing something, we need to know why something stopped in the past that we wanted to keep it going. Money is a good thing.
We choose to go to the moon.
President Kennedy's famous 1962 speech ignited an intense space race between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. But following from the historic lunar landing in 1969, some theorists argue that NASA orchestrated the event as a propaganda tool to hide technological limitations and divert attention from the heavily criticized war in Vietnam. Moon landing deniers claim the moon's lack of atmosphere contradicts the apparent fluttering of the American flag in footage. They also point to visible studio props marked with the letter C, photos with camera crosshairs behind objects, and the absence of stars in the background despite clear conditions. Some theorists suggest that filmmaker Stanley Kubrick produced much of the moon landing footage in a studio, drawing connections from his work on 2001: A Space Odyssey. They point to alleged clues in his 1980 movie, The Shining, such as the Apollo 11 sweater, room 237, symbolizing the distance of 237,000 miles to the moon, and Tang food cans which were created for astronauts. Regardless of your beliefs, a pertinent question arises. If the moon landing was authentic, who filmed Armstrong stepping out of the lunar module when he was supposedly the first person on the moon?
In 1969, Neil Armstrong became the first man to ever set foot on the moon. But one of the most famous legends that came out of this moon landing was from a missing 2 minutes of audio transmission that was being broadcast live on national television. As legend has it, during this missing 2 minutes, Neil Armstrong had apparently switched his radio over to the medical channel, which was not public, and had apparently said this to NASA: "These babies are huge, sir. Oh God, you wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spacecraft out there lined up on the far side of the crater's edge. They're on the moon watching us." Now, this legend was confirmed by NASA engineer Otto Binder, who was monitoring the uncensored version of these radio frequencies during the mission. But despite Otto's credibility, his claims were mostly written off by the media because NASA insisted that the only reason the audio cut out is because one of the cameras on board overheated, thus interfering with the reception. That is until in 1979, Maurice Chatelain, former chief of NASA communications, wrote in his book, "Moments before Armstrong stepped down the ladder to set foot on the moon, 2 UFOs hovered overhead. Edwin Aldridge took several pictures of them. Some of these photographs have been published in the June 1975 issue of Modern People magazine. The encounter was common knowledge in NASA, but nobody talked about it until now." Now, whether or not this legend is true, the moon itself is a very bizarre space object. For example, the moon is about 1/4 the size of the planet Earth, making it the 5th largest moon in our entire solar system. No other planet that we're aware of has a moon that's that big relative to the size of the planet it's orbiting. Which brings us to the orbit. Did you know that the same side of the moon is always facing the Earth? This is because the moon rotates exactly 1 time for every 1 orbit that it takes around the planet Earth. Meaning that every time you've ever looked at the moon in your entire life, you've always seen the exact same thing. So if you think about it, the only people who have ever seen the backside of the moon with their own eyes are the Apollo astronauts. And what's crazier is that if you took the distance between the Earth and the moon and you divided it by the diameter of the moon, you get the number 108. And ironically, if you did the same for the sun, taking the distance from Earth, dividing it by its diameter, you also get the number 108. And because of this ratio, during a solar eclipse, the moon perfectly blocks out the sun to the millimeter, because the moon is exactly 400 times smaller than the sun and is 400 times closer to Earth than the sun, which is kind of crazy to think about when you realize the significance of this number 108. The radius of the moon itself is 1,080 miles, a multiple of 108. This temple in Cambodia, built in the 12th century, has exactly 108 towers, and the Hindu and the Buddhist religions consider the number 108 as the basis of creation, representing our existence in the universe. But here's what really gets me. If any of these weird moon coincidences did not exist, then neither would life on planet Earth as we know it. There would be no tides, there would be no seasons, and there would likely be no intelligent life, leading many people to believe that maybe the moon was put there by some other form of intelligence, which is an interesting theory to consider because there are ancient cultures that have been around for tens of thousands of years which talk about a time before the moon.
The moon landing one's my favorite.
Really?
I think with the moon landing, it's way more likely that we went to the moon, but that some of the footage is fake. Some squirrely footage. You ever see the video of them jumping around? It looks like they're on trampolines.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Watch this. Look at this. Watch these guys bounce up in the air. It's like they're on some sort of wire, like they're being yanked up into the air.
Oh, yeah.
If you watch, like sometimes they're falling down, and when they're falling down, it looks like they get yanked back up. Like, homeboy falls down, and then it looks like he gets yanked back up. Look at this. Whoops.
Oh, he did not. That's not him standing up.
Yeah, what is this?
That's not him standing up. You can't stand up like that.
Right, but you're on the moon. Okay,
No,
so you realize you're in
no.
1/6 Earth's gravity.
But there was nothing to make him go like this.
Exactly.
Right? You can't.
Watch this
You have
again.
to turn to your base to get up. You can't look at. There's nothing on the ground. How's he going to get the momentum?
He's
to
getting
go?
yanked up. Like he would have super abs. He would have to be like a
No,
break
you
dancer.
can't because. Okay, maybe a breakdancer. Maybe a breakdancer. But you can't get up without putting a base down, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really weird. I never
very
saw
weird.
it.
In
And he only
the
had one
press-
foot on the ground there too.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's true. Look at this. Watch.
So he stood up
Ooh,
like.
Look at that. It's ridiculous.
He can't do it.
What? His right foot's down. His left foot's up, and he just goes straight up in the air. It is crazy.
That's fake.
But I've never been in 1/6 Earth's gravity in either of you.
No,
so maybe it's
Joe,
easier
it's
to
fake,
do.
dude. Can't stand up like that.
You think that's
You-
fake?
That
Ben
video.
Askren says we never went to the moon.
Now, this is probably the greatest conspiracy theory of all time, as far as I'm concerned. I think it's up there with the Roswell incident. I think there is so much evidence to suggest that this moon landing was faked. I really don't think NASA have done themselves any favours trying to convince anyone otherwise. Me, I'm still on the fence about this. it's really hard to believe NASA and everybody involved in these moon landings that this did happen. It's such a strange event. I would love to believe that we truly have landed on the moon. Obviously, I know we've sent rovers and all this kind of thing up there before, but there is so much to suggest that we haven't. There's so many things stopping us from doing it. One of them being the Van Allen radiation belt. There are ways around it, apparently. You can sort of go up and over it a little bit through the weakest point. You can go through it at a certain speed and the radiation wouldn't affect people too much. But for NASA to say that, we can't get through it yet in nowadays, so how did we do it back then in 1961? I find it a very strange thing for NASA to say. There's just so much evidence to suggest that some of the pictures look doctored. Some of them, the backdrops look exactly the same in different photos where they're supposed to be in different locations. I kind of agree with Joe Rogan on this, that he thinks that, we have been to the moon, but a lot of the photos were faked for one reason or another. Possibly they went up there and saw things that they shouldn't have seen. It's such a big story. I really don't think this is ever going to be solved. Unless NASA admit to this. There's probably only around 100 people who have ever really known the truth, and it's such a small number of people that that kind of secret is easier to keep a secret. I don't think any of the astronauts, Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, I don't think they'll ever tell the truth. If they didn't go, I don't think they'd ever tell the truth. Otherwise, these people were national heroes, not just in America. I think they were heroes all around the world for doing what they did. They got so much respect from people, from their families. Would they really want to give all that up to tell the truth, especially after all this time? I don't think they ever will. Part of me really hopes that this was real. I really, really want to believe that we did land on the moon. What an achievement that would have been, but so much evidence to suggest, that we didn't. One of the things being, I read that the director, Ron Howard, when he wanted to make Apollo 13, he wanted to use some of the original footage that NASA had shot. He was going to take it away, update it into HD, and then use it in his film. He asked NASA for the permission to use it. They said, okay, give us a couple of days. A couple of days later, they come back and say they've lost the footage. I mean, this is one of the biggest achievements in human history to date. How could you have misplaced all the footage? I find that very strange. They either filmed something they weren't supposed to film, or it wasn't filmed at all, and that is why they don't have the footage. Also, losing all the technology they had back then. Again, it's the biggest achievement in human history. How could you lose the technology? Surely this would have been archived. It's such a big thing. How could you lose this fantastic technology that you had? And nowadays that we've got even better technology, how have we not sort of surpassed this and gone back to the moon and shown them there in high definition quality? It's I am more leaning towards the fact that these were faked missions. Again, but I would love to believe that we did do it, and some of the images that we saw were doctored because of potential things that we shouldn't be seeing. It's a real tricky one for me, this. Now, I'm not here to convince you one way or the other. I'm just here to show you some evidence, give you my input. You can make your own minds up about this. But for me, I really still am on the fence. I am leaning more towards that these weren't real events. But again, I really don't want to believe it, but it really does suggest to me that these were faked events. Just the wealth of evidence to suggest otherwise. Yeah, I really am on the fence.
Imagine making a movie so damn good it makes a lot of people believe that you're capable of faking the moon landing. This is exactly what Stanley Kubrick did with 2001: A Space Odyssey. So rewind to 1961, you have John F. Kennedy announcing the goal of landing men on the moon. It was way more than just a national goal, it was all about the space race with the Soviet Union and proving technological superiority. A lot of this rocket tech tied directly into missiles, obviously, and this went hand in hand with the Cold War. Fast forward to 1968, Stanley Kubrick puts out 2001. This is the most realistic portrayal of space travel anyone has ever seen. He's using innovative new things like front projection to blow everyone away. Also working hand in hand with Arthur C. Clarke to guarantee authenticity. What we got after the 1969 moon landing was a perfect storm of government mistrust, which had been growing through the 60s, and just general disbelief at the masterpiece Kubrick had been able to create. Many people just assumed he had to have been involved because there's no way we actually could have gone to the moon. We started getting books, documentaries, interviews that all built on this theory and grew it in people's minds. Once the internet came along and then social media, this theory blew up even more as it's so easy to just spread misinformation and not get checked on it. So you have people who don't understand film, don't understand history, and don't understand science coming together to create the masterpiece of bullshit that is this theory. People would say things like Kubrick was trying to tell us in The Shining with his Apollo 11 sweater, and also the significance of room 237, which they think is the number of 1,000 miles the moon is away from the Earth, even though it's 239,000 miles. To be frank, the technology to replicate this simply did not exist in 1969. For example, they couldn't replicate lunar gravity or undisturbed lunar soil. People thought the flag was waving. That's because the astronauts twisted it into the ground, creating movement in a vacuum. People asked why are there no stars in the background. It's because just how bright the sun is on the moon, and also the lunar surface reflects a lot of that light. People complain that the only footage of the moon landing was from NASA. Over the years, many solo astronomers and also other international space agencies have verified this. There have been satellite flyovers. They've taken pictures of the landing site. There are retroreflectors we placed on the lunar surface that are still used today in experiments. Lastly, people think Stanley Kubrick was a recluse because he had some kind of insane secret. He was a recluse because he was a recluse his entire life. A strange guy who always kept to himself. He was an obsessive artist, and it's just a ridiculous argument to think these two things are tied together. All in all, this is very silly, but fun to look back into, and an interesting facet of history that still sticks around today.
Stanley Kubrick. People believe that when they faked the moon landing, that Stanley Kubrick assists the government in faking parts of the moon landing. Here's the thing, and I found this clip from this movie called Eyes Wide Shut. Apparently, it was going to be Stanley Kubrick's greatest contribution to the film society ever. And in this scene, it was a very weird scene. Tom Cruise enters into this seance, this typical Illuminati ritual where all these powerful people with masks and robes were surrounding this one central center, and in the middle was this oracle professing to Tom Cruise to take his clothes off and join us. And it was obviously a reference to what we think of when we think of, Illuminati rituals. Well, the weird thing is when he was finally done with the rough cut final version of the movie, he was so excited and he brought it to Warner Brothers. 10 days after he brought that, Stanley Kubrick passes away.
Wow.
Stanley Kubrick is one of my all-time favourite film directors. I think he's fantastic. Made some great films, and I think if there was anybody that you were going to go to fake something like this, then this guy would be the one you'd ask. His work on 2001: A Space Odyssey is incredible. It really still holds up. It looks great today. The visual effects on this film were incredible. It's not an easy film to watch. It's not one of these films you can just put on in the background and sort of pick up on it here and now. You've really got to sit. It's much like all of his films. You've really got to sit there and watch it. But yeah, it's such a great film, and I can imagine that they were going to ask him to direct this, if anyone. Now, a couple of rumours that I've heard suggest that they were kind of threatening him, suggesting that they were going to lock up his brother because he was part of the Communist Party. That is all fake. He didn't even have a brother. He only had one sister. So that was totally fake. Other things in his other films, like The Shining, with Danny Torrance wearing the Apollo 11 jumper. Now, I've read that he was just a huge fan of rockets and space travel and things like that. So it really does sort of say, you know, he would put these kind of things in his films if he was fans of them. There is a lot of hidden meanings within his films, and you know, people still talk about 2001: A Space Odyssey now, with the hidden meanings, and then with The Shining as well, and even towards his last film, which was Eyes Wide Shut. Again, another great film. You know, he's the only person who would have known really what his hidden meanings were, and sadly, we'll never know. Do I think he directed them? If anyone was going to do it, it would have been him. But you know, I think everyone's reaching. They're trying to find things to suggest that, you know, he was the one who directed them. I think clutching at straws, really. You're looking for something to find, and you will find it. And you know, you can pick out all sorts of meanings within his films, and sort of put claims behind them. I don't think he did film them. I think he would have been the person to, you know, own up to it. I don't think he took a lot of rubbish off of, you know, Hollywood. I don't think he would have taken a lot of rubbish off of governments and things like that, unless they really had something on him to suggest otherwise. But no, I don't think he did film the moon landings. There was an interview, a recorded interview that came out a little while ago where he owned up to it. But if you find this video, I've seen it quite a few places where they're sort of saying it's real. It's not. It's an actor sort of playing Stanley Kubrick. It's not him. So, you know, he's never ever hinted in any of his interviews, you know, that he did fake these moon landings. So I don't think he did. People might think otherwise, but just my opinion. In my opinion, I don't think he did. I'm going to wrap that video up for today. Thank you for joining me. Really hope you've enjoyed. If you have, please leave a like. Please leave a comment. Subscribe would be fantastic. But yeah, really hope you've enjoyed, and hopefully see you on the next one.